Organization in Geneva in Switzerland. Our reporter Aldrin Sampear is in Geneva. Let's cross to him now and get an update on this all-important meeting. Aldrin, a very good afternoon to you. Give us a sense of what this meeting is about and what's going on.
Certainly an all-important meeting, as you've indicated, and as you've indicated as well, that this is the first meeting that is being co-chaired by the President Cyril Ramaphosa, as well as the Prime Minister of Sweden. The meeting is currently underway. Unfortunately, we're not allowed in there, but there are certain things that we've spoken to some of the commissioners about that they wish to be raised here during this meeting, and it comes to issues around the income inequality that various countries are facing at the moment, as well as the wage gap between male and female. And this has been a huge issue. If you look, for instance, at what's happening in France, they've decided to have a legislation that companies that fail to adhere to policies to ensure that they equalize the pay gap between female and male employees, that there'll be a 1% penalty on the entire wage bill. So I was speaking to Mthunzi earlier on, who's representing business, and he was saying that this is probably something that the various governments should be looking into. But of course, these are only things that can be ratified once there is a convention on this report that will be finalized next year and tabled at the International Labour Organization's conference that will be taking place next year in June. And we have been told that the President, Cyril Ramaphosa, is expected to address that conference as well. Right now, actually joined by the spokesperson of the President about this meeting that is taking place. An all-important meeting, as Peter has indicated, not only for South Africa, but for the entire continent.
Of course, indeed. We regard it as a very important meeting. When President Ramaphosa was asked to co-chair this commission, he was excited, firstly, because he'd have an opportunity to co-chair with the Prime Minister of Sweden. You'll know that both President Ramaphosa and the Prime Minister of Sweden are former trade unionists. So it brings a very interesting dynamic to the Global Commission that looks at how do you bring together business, how do you bring together governments, and indeed the workers themselves to begin to recognize the new forms of work, to look at ways, how do you respond to the challenges that we are likely to face in years to come? And there's many of them, whether it's the technological advances that we're seeing, for example, the introduction of, your Ubers of this world, your Airbnb and so forth, or whether it's the effects of climate change. So it's been very interesting, but I think what has also been, for us as South Africans, particularly poignant and maybe very important, is the fact that the ILO is celebrating 100 years in 2019, and you'll know that this is a happy coincidence as our country is also celebrating the centenary of Tata Nelson Mandela and Mama Albertina Sisulu. So as the President is here, he's wanting to bring to bear the values of Tata Nelson Mandela to the work that we're doing around our workers. But Aldrin, I must also mention that, just yesterday, I think the labour force survey results came out, speaking to, amongst others, the high employment rate, the persistently high employment rate that we have in our country. Now, this meeting, when it's speaking about the future of work, the one point that the President made was that it can't be business as usual. We can't gloss over, problems of unemployment. So we need to ensure that we level the playing fields, both in the developed as well as the developing world, and say that how does everybody effectively participate in the world of work. So those are the conversations. The President has brought the issue of youth into very strong focus, and indeed, how do we build human capabilities moving forward?
And this is actually something that the President has pioneered, this issue around bringing youth on board when it comes to youth unemployment, dealing with the issue around youth unemployment, and that forum that was launched earlier this year.
Yes, earlier on this year, we would have launched the Youth Employment Service, which is really an initiative again. And sorry, just coming back to this meeting, the one thing that the President always appreciates is this almost tripartite multilateral approach to resolving problems. So you have an ILO that brings together, business, government, and the workers itself. So at home, the CEO initiative was one of the programs that were started to look at how do you bring business to resolve some of the pressing economic challenges we we have. So you have companies that have come on board and said that over a period of 3 years, we're going to take no less than 1 million young people to participate in the initiative. 1 year's paid work where, again, we invest in that human capital, ensuring that they get opportunities to be exposed to the world of business. And again, on the other side, understanding that it's a give and take. So amongst the issues that government has brought to the table, we've gazetted for public comment issues around, amendments to the BE scores of companies who participate, and again, giving them incentive to do so. So it's a project that's just taken off, but we are confident that we will meet the target the President has set.
I'm going to try and preempt the interview that I'm going to have later on with the President. And this is probably one of the questions that I'll get to ask him. It is the announcement that he made during his first State of the Nation address, where he spoke about this digital industrial commission and meeting with the ITC sector to ensure that South Africa is ready for this transformation that's currently taking place. But quite crucial to that is the issue around the cost of data.
Well, I would not want you to preempt the President, and we will allow the President to answer himself. But just to say that later on this week, the Department of Telecommunications will be presenting their budget vote. And I know that working together, amongst others, with the Department of Science and Technology, a lot of work has been done around the setting up of that Fourth Industrial Revolution Commission, which is supposed to say these changes that we see in the world, can we not look at them as challenges only, but also opportunities? What does it mean? When the nature of the jobs as we know them at this point change, and how are our people then ready to take them up? On the cost of data, there has been some very interesting developments on there, not only on data must fall, but I know that the governing party would have made calls, for example, to say that our competition authorities need to step into the fray, as well as the regulator, and to look at that. And I think that there are a lot of announcements that are coming in that regard.
We're certainly looking forward to that announcement with regards to the reduction of the cost of labor. But also speaking about Guy Ryder, the Director General of this institution, the ILO, has also spoken about this issue around people having the perception that technology is killing jobs. He says actually what's happening, while technology may be killing jobs in some instances, it's also creating jobs. And I was saying yesterday to Bongani Pingwa that there was a time at the SABC where you only had TV news and radio news, but now you have digital news as well, and that's an entire department at the SABC.
Indeed. And I think that's what the President means when he said, let's look at the opportunities that lie within there. Just the example that you're making, I think that's what some of the things that the Fourth Industrial Revolution needs to think about. But at the core of it, Aldrin, we must accept is the skills base that you require in order to be able to take up those opportunities. I mean, whether you speak about millennials, you speak about Generation Z, a lot of young people who are coming up are very technologically savvy. And what we need to be asking ourselves is that as governments, as business, as workers, how do you harness those energies, those talents around technology into productive work? And then those are some of the issues that they're discussing. I mean, you could look at social media, where somebody would argue that, it's really something for a pastime. But you look at the revenue that's generated through those platforms, you look at the conversations that happen there and how they are beginning to change and define our society. So we don't regard technology really as an issue. What we need to say is that those labor-intensive jobs, I'll give an example. In the mining industry, you've got lots of labor-intensive jobs that may have been done away with the advent of technology. Now, in places like the Eastern Cape, where a lot of those miners come from, in some of our southern African countries, there's efforts that are being undertaken by some mining companies to ensure that those workers are reskilled in those areas, whether it's in welding, whether it is in some types of manufacturing. So we need to keep our mind open to say that what opportunities are presented here, and how do we ensure that as these institutions you position yourselves properly to take them up.
Khusela Diko, thank you so much for your time. Well, indeed, we'll be looking forward to that interview with the President later on this evening. Quite a number of issues that Khusela has raised, and also the issues that have been raised by various speakers that I've spoken throughout this morning, including the Minister of Labour, Mildred Oliphant, who said that what she's looking for here is that she also wants to look at the opportunities that are available that South Africa can tap into to help it get out of this stubbornly high unemployment unemployment rate, which is sitting at 26.7%, and she's hoping that she can get some ideas from the different commissioners who are sitting in this meeting that's currently taking place.
Aldrin, thanks very much indeed. That's where we're going to leave it. Hopefully we'll catch up with Aldrin again a little bit later on. As he said, that he'll be speaking to the President, who is currently the co-chair of the Global Commission on the Future of Work, and that's an initiative of the International Labour Organization that was set up in 2017. And today, alongside the Prime Minister of Sweden, Stefan Löfven, they both former trade unionists are working with 28 Commission members, and these are made up of experts from government, business and labour to discuss the future of work that should be fairer, that should be better for all. So a lot to do, and hopefully this will contribute to a major report that they're hoping to release in 2019. But we'll get more details from Aldrin Sampear a little bit later on this evening. In the meantime,